There aren't many ways to strengthen your roster in the month of August and September after the MLB trade deadline, but it is not impossible, and that comes from teams placing players on waivers. Generally, this is teams that don't want to pay the remainder of guys' contracts. We saw the Angels do it last year with guys like Lucas Giolito and Dominic Leone, etc. Obviously, last year the Mariners got Dominic Leone out of that. They didn't have to make a trade or anything. They just claimed Dominic Leone. They had to pay the rest of his salary in 2023, and that was it. That's how these waivers work at the end of August, usually going into September. As we get closer to September, there's a lot of guys that are going to start getting put on waivers over the next 24 hours or so. It's already happened with the Giants, and the Mariners have an opportunity to go out there and acquire some guys to help them with the rest of the season through September and possibly into the postseason if the Mariners were going to make it. But before we get into what guys are available, I think we have to explain how waivers work because it is a bit confusing. So waiver priority is based on a reverse winning percentage of the teams. So for example, the team with the worst winning percentage, of course the White Sox, would have the number one priority. The team with the second worst winning percentage, which in this case would be the Marlins, would have second priority, so on and so forth. And when you claim a player, you do not get reset to the back of the line. You stay, so the White Sox will have the number one priority the entire season if they wanted to. Obviously, the White Sox are not going to go claim any of these guys because what's the point? Based on winning percentage, that puts the Mariners kind of middle of the pack here with a 507. I believe they're like 15th or 16th in the waiver priority here. So picking in maybe the latter half, but nonetheless still an opportunity to acquire some of these players. So just to kind of put an example out there, we're going to say that David Ortiz is put on waivers, right? The Mariners with a 540 winning percentage would have priority over the Yankees with a 550 winning percentage because the Mariners would have the lower percentage, and because it goes in reverse order of winning percentage, the Mariners would have priority over the Yankees in that scenario. So if both teams put a claim in on David Ortiz, the Mariners would end up getting David Ortiz in that situation because again, they are ahead in the waiver claim situation. I really hope that made sense. I'm not good at explaining these things. Some important things to note here is a team that is making a claim on a player, a new player has to be on your roster by September 1st to be eligible for postseason play. And because of the fact that the waiver claim system generally takes 2-ish days, a team would basically have to put their players on waivers today. The day that I'm recording this, which is Thursday. I'm putting this video out Friday. They would have to have put their players on waivers on Thursday to make sure that whatever team claimed them would be able to have postseason eligibility for said player. Because at that point, with the system not finishing for 2 days, they would already be September 1st at that point, and that player would no longer be eligible for postseason play. So as long as the team has posted the player on waivers, then on Thursday or prior to that, so for example, the Giants put Thairo Estrada, Taylor Rogers, and Tyler Matzik on waivers, they're fine. If those guys get claimed, which I'm pretty sure Rogers will, if those guys get claimed, then they are fine for postseason play. But if a team does it on Friday, they put players on waivers, whoever is claimed off of that team, they're not eligible for postseason play. Now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about the guys that have for sure, at the time of recording this, been already put on waivers. The Mariners have an opportunity to claim. It starts here with what the Giants have done with Thairo Estrada, Taylor Rogers, and Tyler Matzik. Taylor Rogers is the brother of Tyler Rogers, the weird side armor sinker ball guy that the Mariners touched up for 6 hits in a row. Not the same guy, just so we're clear. He is a twin brother, however. Taylor Rogers is a lefty. And in terms of these three players, in my opinion, the only one that makes sense is Taylor Rogers. Again, in terms of contracts and whatnot, Thairo Estrada has been pretty bad so far this year. I believe that he's going to cost about $850K the rest of the way, but let's look at least these two guys, in Thairo Estrada and Taylor Rogers, because Tyler Matzik is on the injured list. So let's look at Estrada and Rogers and see if either of them fit. So Estrada, if he was to be claimed, would cost his claiming team about $850,000 the rest of the way. With how bad he's been, I don't think it really makes sense to go out and sign him. As Ken Rosendahl says here, Estrada's hitting .246 and has some of the worst chase rates in all of baseball. And yeah, you can kind of see that by his baseball savant page. It is really, really ugly. First percentile and walk rate is horrendous. Whiff percentage, he actually doesn't swing and miss too much, but he chases outside the zone quite a bit. And as you can see by his spray chart, he very much is a pull hitter kind of guy, which doesn't necessarily bode well for a right-handed hitter in T-Mobile Park. He can play second base, and honestly, he's a pretty dang good defensive second baseman. You can see that right here. But with that being said, I don't think it makes sense with his fielding. His outs above average here in the 96th percentile. guy. With that being said, however, he would be under club control for a few more years here if the Mariners did decide to take him to arbitration. He's had some good years in the past, just not so much in 2024. But you look back at 2023, he had a 102 OPS plus, hitting 271, 315, 416. He did steal 23 bags with 14 homers, so he hasn't been necessarily bad throughout his career, but he's been pretty bad this year with a 69. Nice. OPS plus in 2024. Maybe a team decides they do want to take a chance at him, but I think based on arbitration and whatnot, he's just going to be too expensive for the player that it looks like he is. So I don't think that Estrada really makes sense. Taylor Rogers, on the other hand, makes a lot of sense and could be a steal for whatever team claims him. He has a 2.45 ERA, and he has an above average strikeout and above average walk rates for a pitcher out of the bullpen. He's 33 years old, and he is owed roughly $2.15 million this season and $12 million next year. So if the Mariners did want to acquire Taylor Rogers, this is all coming from Ken Rosenthal's article at The Athletic. If the Mariners wanted to acquire Taylor Rogers, they'd have to pay him 14-ish, about a little under $15 million for the next year or so to acquire this guy, which isn't necessarily the end of the world. But for a team where we heard they might want to trade Logan Gilbert, Randy Arozarena for monetary purposes, I don't know if it makes sense to go out there and acquire him. He would be a much better option than Taylor Saucedo right now, and probably even Gabe Spire. He's had a really good year. Looking at his Savant page, he does not get hit hard at all. He strikes out a ton of hitters, and the only real glaring problem here is he doesn't get a whole lot of chase. But, I mean, who cares? When you get results like this, I don't necessarily care if you're getting a lot of chase. In 2023, he had a 3.83 ERA in 60 games. This year, in about the same amount of innings pitched, he's down to a 2.45. So, Taylor Rogers, especially in this Mariners pitching lab, I think does make sense. I think that adding Taylor Rogers makes sense for this team. But monetarily wise, I just don't know if it makes sense to add a guy for, $14-ish million for 2 years, who has a career, he's got a career 3.36. He hasn't been bad by any means. But this is definitely his, I guess, outlier year when you look at his career so far. He was really good in 2019 and 2018 as well, which is actually surprising because that was like the juice ball era in 2019. But overall, a 1.60 ERA plus for Taylor Rogers at the age of 33. He would be a good lefty for the Mariners out of their bullpen, but we all know the Mariners need bats. And unfortunately, as of right now, the only guy that's really been placed on waivers has been Thairo Estrada, and that's not the kind of bat that you need. Usually it's guys that are on like a 1-year contract that makes sense getting put on waivers for teams that just that have nothing left to play for. So for example, here we are looking at the Texas Rangers roster page here. Guys that they are signed to a 1-year contract, like a lot of times it'll be relievers like David Robinson, Jose Urania, Kirby Yates, etc. Or even Andrew Heaney, a guy who is a serviceable starter for a lot of teams right now. He hasn't had the best year, but he's a guy at 3.95 ERA. Some teams could use that, especially if they do have some injuries in their starting rotation. Sticking with the Rangers here in terms of bats, I mean, Carson Kelly is a guy that has been talked about as just being sent down the waiver like black hole. There's really nothing to talk about with Carson Kelly. He's just not that good. Another interesting one that actually just got announced as I was recording this video, the Cardinals placed Tommy Pham on waivers here. That is a bat that does make some sense for the Mariners. I don't necessarily love Tommy Pham as a person, but as a baseball player, he's been all right for the most part this year. Since going to St. Louis at the MLB trade deadline, Tommy Pham's hitting 206, 286, 368 with an 81 OPS plus. But overall with Chicago earlier this year, he was hitting 266, 333, 380 with a 710 OPS and a 101 OPS plus. So I think that overall his 7 home runs, Tommy Pham doesn't do a whole lot for me in terms of guys that are going to be available on this waiver wire, because frankly he just hasn't been that good. And where do you really put him when you have Victor, Randy, you have Luke Raley, you have Julio, of course, all in your outfield right now? One of those guys probably needs to DH, and there's just, in terms of the log jam that is the outfield, I don't necessarily know if adding someone like Tommy Pham makes a whole lot of sense. You could have him DH, but you probably want to have the DH spot open for guys like Justin Turner or Julio when he needs a day off his feet in center field with his ankle, or there's just so many moving parts here. Or maybe you want to have Garver in there on a DH day for some reason, or if Cal needs a day off but you still want his bat in the lineup. So I don't necessarily think that Tommy Pham is a great fit. If I'm the Mariners, they need to be looking for some infield help. That is, as we get closer to September here, They need to be able to add some infield help. With that being said, however, the roster expansion, which is only 2 players now, September call-ups, if you will, the roster expansion is coming in a couple of days, so the Mariners may start to do that, where they look to acquire a guy like Tommy Pham and just add him to the team when the rosters expand. Just another bat to have in that clubhouse. But nonetheless, in terms of players the Mariners could add, I think Tommy Pham is the best bat available at the time of recording this. Are there even going to be any bats for the Mariners to acquire during this waiver period? I'm not sure. We're going to find out, though, within the next 24 hours or so what players are added to the waiver wire, so we'll be sure to keep you guys updated on that. Thank you guys so much for watching this one, and go Mariners.